Abortion remains a very contentious issue in this country, and people have heartfelt views on both sides of the issue. I'm not sure exactly why we're seeing this happening right now, but most of the laws are not as extreme as Alabama's. Alabama seems to have gone further than any other state.
This is Maine Senator Susan Collins, the deciding vote to confirm an anti-choice Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, who can't quite seem to figure out why states are now introducing harsh anti-abortion laws that are clearly intended to get challenged in the courts. Now, why could that possibly be? And I truly don't know if Susan Collins is that naive or if this is all part of some disingenuous plan, but either way, it's left the senator looking ridiculous. Clearly, the point of these harsh anti-abortion laws is to land them in the courts and to appeal them where they're inevitably struck down until one ends up in the Supreme Court, where, for the first time in decades, there is a reliable conservative majority. It's not rocket science. That said, I get why Susan Collins is acting perplexed, since her political future is now hitched to a guy handpicked by the Heritage Foundation because of his opposition to an issue that she claims to believe in. The purportedly pro-choice senator bought right into Kavanaugh's sales pitch that he definitely totally respects precedent and that he believes Roe v. Wade is settled law. But nothing in Kavanaugh's past suggested that he would protect a woman's right to choose, and that was put on display almost immediately. In February of this year, the Supreme Court issued an injunction blocking the implementation of harsh new abortion restrictions in Louisiana. It required doctors who provide abortion services to practice at a nearby hospital, which would have placed an unnecessary burden on the right to abortion and would have shuttered 2 out of the 3 clinics that perform the procedure in the state. And while Chief Justice John Roberts was surprisingly in the majority of justices supporting injunction, Brett Kavanaugh, in one of his first decisions, voted to let the law go into effect. In other words, despite the undue burden that Louisiana's new restrictions put on a woman's right to choose, despite the fact that their purpose was to chip away at the established precedent that was Roe v. Wade, to protect a woman's right to a safe and legal abortion in this country, Brett Kavanaugh opted to chip away at it. Which makes these assurances by Susan Collins seem all the more absurd now.
I do not believe that Brett Kavanaugh will overturn
His precedents
Roe
are overturned.
He noted that Roe had been reaffirmed 19 years later by Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and that it was precedent on precedent. He said it should be extremely rare that it be overturned, and it should be an example.
So you have obviously full confidence.
I do. We talked about whether he considered Roe to be settled law. He said that he agreed with what Justice Roberts said at his nomination hearing, in which he said that it was settled law. I could not vote for a judge who had demonstrated hostility to Roe v. Wade because it would indicate a lack of respect for precedent. What Judge Kavanaugh told me, and he's the first Supreme Court nominee that I've interviewed out of 6 who has told me this, is that he views precedent not just as a legal doctrine, but as rooted in our Constitution. And he reveres our Constitution. I asked him, is it sufficient if 5 current sitting justices believe that Roe should be overturned? And he said no. I would not support a nominee who demonstrated hostility to Roe v. Wade, because that would mean to me that their judicial philosophy did not include a respect for established decision. Judge Kavanaugh is the first Supreme Court nominee to express the view that precedent is not merely a practice and tradition, but rooted in Article 3 of our Constitution itself. I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
And so now, with draconian abortion laws all but certain to end up before the Supreme Court, Susan Collins' dismal judgment may put hundreds of thousands of women in danger as the future of safe, legal abortion in this country is put in jeopardy. And that will be her legacy. Just one more Republican who says one thing and does the opposite, who would sanctimoniously grandstand before falling in line with a party that serves hardline extremists, who preaches small government at the same time that they legislate their way into doctors' offices and bedrooms. Susan Collins may not be sure why we're seeing this right now, but the rest of the country does.